In the region, the Kenya's National Assembly is this afternoon expected to resume debate on the country's nominees to the East African Legislative Assembly. The regional body postponed yesterday's swearing-in of a new parliament by 2 weeks to give Kenya time to resolve the nominations dispute. This is not the first time Kenya has delayed the EALA timelines of unresolved disputes. All other EAC member states have already forwarded their names to the Assembly. Let's bring in our reporter, Timothy Otieno, who has been, of course, covering the proceedings in Arusha, the East African Legislative Assembly. Good job there, Tim. Many thanks for doing that for us. Now, what can we expect? So 2 weeks extension, just if you can just bring us up to speed of what's happening at EALA.
Well, according to the Speaker for the East Africa Legislative Assembly, Dan Kidega, the extension to some extent is indefinite, but they had given a window of 2 weeks to see whether Kenya can sort itself out, come up with the nominees list. If not, then after 2 weeks, then they decide whether they'll swear in the next assembly without Kenyan legislators, or whether they can still continue waiting to find out whether Kenya actually makes amendments and forwards the nominees list to EALA. So that period is still rather open, but the 2 weeks is just for the monitoring purposes to see whether Kenya can actually put its house in order.
How much has, in Kenya today being an electioneering period, how much has this affected operations at the East African Legislative Assembly?
It has, to some extent, almost paralyzed. Because I remember when we were there over the last 2 weeks, there's even a day they had to suspend seating because there were no members from Kenya. And according to the Treaty for the Establishment of the Community, all countries have to be represented at the floor of the House for House business to continue. So I remember at that particular time, I think only one Kenyan member was there, Honorable Mumbi Ngaru. All other 9 were not within East Africa community within itself. So the issue is actually affecting the floor of their house because, one, it has already postponed a very important exercise of swearing in new members. South Sudan also included in that particular list. Secondly, issues like the budget. There was almost a paralysis of passing this year's budget, the financial year 2017-2018 budget, if Kenyan members would not have arrived at the moment. So the issue of nominees is actually affecting what's taking place at the regional body and could affect the operations at that particular house, Ben.
All right. So now the focus now shifts to the Kenya National Assembly to debate those issues concerning the Kenyan nominees. How close is Kenya to resolving that standoff?
I think the issue of Kenya it's become political. Even the EALA nominations is much more of a political. The issue has been that the opposition did not forward sufficient names. Initially, they had forwarded only 4 names. They have Kenya, every country has 9 representatives to the House.
Right.
So the Kenyan context is the Jubilee Party gets 5 nominees because it has the majority in both the Senate and the National Assembly, and the other 4 slots go to the opposition. So initially the opposition had only forwarded 4 names out of the possible 4 that are supposed to join. They were compelled by the other side to add additional names because according to the EAC treaty, you can nominate 3 times the number of people who you are supposed to represent. Right. So because the opposition has 4, they can nominate up to 12.
Okay.
But again, the opposition is arguing that the law does not compel them to have to nominate 4. To have to nominate 12. 12 is just the cap. It can't go above 12, but it does not say you have to nominate 12. Right. But as late as this afternoon, Ben, the National Assembly has actually discussed this particular issue, and we've been made aware that the Minority Whip, Wundanyi Member of Parliament, Thomas Mwadegu, did inform the Assembly this afternoon that they actually have additional names, 7 of them, that they could possibly add, but those names have yet to be gazetted by the clerks of the Assembly. So apparently, the opposition has come up with 7 names that will be divided: 3 from ODM, 3 from Wiper, and possibly 1 name from Ford Kenya, to add to the initial 5 that they had nominated earlier on, to make it 12, so that now the House can now dictate and decide who among the 12 is going to be selected. But that still remains, remains open until 4 p.m. this afternoon, when they officially table that and it be gazetted for those names. Yeah.
So this could end sooner rather than later?
It could end It could end sooner. We hope it does end sooner. But then again, the opposition has always been skeptical that we don't want to add more names because we don't want to dictate. We don't want the government side, who are the majority, to dictate for us who they are sending to the regional assembly, which is really an argument that is neither here or there because those names come from the opposition.
All right.
Either way.
Speaking of which, the leader of majority in the National Assembly, Aden Duale, had started raising some queries over some of the nominees, pointing out the son to Kalonzo Musyoka. Are those real issues?
I think they are. I think they are real issues because at the end of the day, these 9 members are going to represent Kenya more so as rather ambassadors and diplomats. Right. And so you have to know who you're sending to the regional body. And the issue was maybe not so much so it was Kalonzo's son, but rather what has he done for the nation to warrant him to be nominated for the member of the East Africa Legislative Assembly. Right. So the nitty-gritty of who actually does play a big role in that. But then at the end of the day, personally, I think still the government side, because it has the numbers, it has the muscle to push whoever they'll want. So if they'll not want Kalonzo's son, he probably won't make it to that particular house.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tim.
No problem.
Timothy Otieno there, of course, has been keeping tabs on what's been happening at the East African Legislative Assembly in Arusha.